Hello, puppies and kittens. This is Aron Ra. It's Monday, June 24th, and I am joined on SkepTalk by Professor Dave. Professor Dave, how you doing, sir?
Good. How are you doing? Always a pleasure.
What's latest going on in your life, sir?
Not much. I mean, I had a couple videos go unexpectedly viral, just debunking some Joe Rogan guests. So I've been enjoying the additional traffic, both financially and then the influx of haters and trolls. That's been fun as well. But double-edged sword always.
Yeah, I'm always a little perplexed about the haters and so forth. I always run into. I argue with idiots online all the time, and they're just like in social media and everything. They're always talking about how they would so pwn me or whatever if they ever had the opportunity. So today I went ahead and put out on Facebook and on Twitter that, hey, I'm going to be on SkepTalk. Creationists, you think you got something? Let's hear it. Let's hear what you think you have.
Yep.
Yeah. So we will find out about that shortly. By the way, I should probably open the call-in studio so I can get that done. All right. And here we go. So take up the time and tell me what you want.
Who, me?
Dave? Yep.
What do I want? What do you mean in terms of?
Well, I told you what I was looking for just now. I was looking for somebody to call in and give us a good argument.
It's a good challenge. Yeah, I'm always ready. I like a good intellectual challenge. I like to try to think on my feet. Why not? Yeah, I mean, I'm down for anything, as always.
Well, as it happens, we do have a theist on the line, and the last time we hosted this show, we had one that was waiting in the queue for just a couple of minutes. Well, he was waiting patiently, and we lost him, so I'm not going to wait any longer on this one. We'll go ahead and bring in Adam from the UK. Can you hear us, sir?
Yes, I can.
Very good, very good. So you are a theist as opposed to atheist, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what is your argument?
Well, so I've called in to claim that we can reason that the initial state of the universe was the product of a mental state. And to conclude that, we need to have a model which relates minded information. And this can be accomplished by just copying the structure of mathematical sets. So in mathematics, an infinite set can output a finite space, like containing values, using a function. But our mental thought works in the same way. So our minds have the exact same structure because we can think of an infinite number of different symbols or propositions. And when we do this, we define out a subset of that information and attribute a value to it. So that would be the output. In fact,
my first question about that would be, what is a mind? And my understanding of that is the mind is the consciousness or your qualia, the product, the memories, and so forth of a brain.
Okay.
Of some sort.
Yeah. So
So you have to have a brain in order to produce a mind.
Well, I wouldn't hold to that presupposition, but so you're asking me what I regard a mind as.
How can you have a mind without a brain?
Well, I would say that the functions that a brain obeys, if you say those are physical functions, since a brain is a physical thing, I'd say that the mind is capable of functions that the brain isn't. So that would be the first
Well, technically,
point,
the mind, every mind that we're aware of is also physical, being that it is the product of a brain. I mean, your thoughts and your memories, these can all be altered physically. They're subject to chemistry and they're subject to injury and so forth. So all brains, all minds are physical. So back to the earlier question, how can you have a mind that is not physical and that is not the product of a brain?
Right. Okay. So if I'm going to have to justify that, I'll just say that you can have a view of reality which is like hierarchical, where the physical is just at the bottom of the hierarchy. In the physical state, we have our objects with specific values, like physical values like velocity of something, a charge or something, that exist at only specific places in space and time. Whereas the mind is capable of more than this. Right? It's capable of abstractions which encompass swathes of physical facts, mathematical facts, logical facts. It's just that mathematics and logic and mental things would just be on higher levels. They should be higher levels of the structure.
Okay, so
if you're familiar with
you've decided that the physical is the bottom rung, and you've made the assertion that rather than explain how a mind can be not physical, you've just asserted that there is an immaterial mind, and that it's higher somehow. The second assertion is that it's higher than the physical and that it is capable of more than the physical is. And you've made all three of these assertions without any supportive data. Now, I realize you said you've got a mathematical way of kind of defining this into existence some way, but I still have the same question. How does, if you're not going to explain to me how a mind can be immaterial, explain to me how a mind can do anything with the physical world.
Okay, so I mean, the reason why I was explaining that is just I'm just explaining like my view. Like you could have a different view of where physics is situated with regards to the mind, what the relationship between mind and matter is. If you want me to explain how, well, I mean, the first place we get any truth from is our private experience, and we have to take that as the starting point. So if we can understand truthful relationships to things that aren't actually physical, well, then the question really kind of turns around and becomes, how can the brain produce the mind if the brain is physical, and physical things are only capable of changing
and the mind
things
is physical too. The mind is necessarily physical too. So you're positing an immaterial mind, something we don't have precedent for, something we don't have evidence for, and then you're making the assertion that the immaterial mind is capable of doing things without any sort of physical capacity, but it's capable of affecting physical things. So it would sound like you're supporting telekinesis, but even telekinesis would still imply that there's a physical interaction between the mind/brain and the rest of the physical world around it. Now you're talking about an immaterial mind's brainless immaterial mind. So it's not telekinesis. How then does the immaterial mind, which you suggested without any supportive data at all, but you've made the assertion that this mind can do things beyond what the physical can do. Can you show that it can do anything at all, whether it's above or below the? Just show that this mind is capable of doing fuck all.
Well, we know that minds affect things physically, and what I'm trying to do is present the evidence to you. That we can have minds without.
What evidence would that be? I'm keen to remind me when we get to the evidence.
Okay, well, the evidence is what our private experience is. Like we understand truths that aren't physical truths. So physical facts and physical
what's a non-physical truth?
Like the distinction between, say, for example, true or false, or like logical implication, certain mathematical rules that just don't physically exist. So, like Penrose stairs. Those have.
So you're saying that this immaterial mind that you're talking about is an abstract concept, so it also doesn't really exist?
No, I'm saying that it does exist. I'm saying the physical universe exists, and it's related to.
You're talking about things, abstract things that only exist in the mind. So, like the concepts of mathematical concepts that you would talk about, irrational numbers or whatever. It sounds like you're talking about things that conceptually only exist in the mind. So, but you're talking about something that is a mind but isn't physical. It's outside the mind, above the mind somehow, and is capable of doing things to the physical world somehow. What's the somehow? If you won't tell me how the mind can exist at all, then tell me how this immaterial mind does anything.
Okay. Well, I mean, things happen in physics in general according to quantum mechanics, right? So in quantum mechanics, you have this relationship between like wave functions, which are abstract, and the actual product of the collapse, which is the physical thing that you can actually see.
Wave functions are abstract?
Place. Well, yeah, because they encompass entire swathes of space and time. They're not confined to one particular coordinate.
Okay,
and what
Dave,
I'm saying is,
I don't do physics. I don't do cosmology. Wave functions are abstract?
I don't know that I would say that. I mean, I think the main problem here is that you're doing a lot of ad hoc assertions, which is fine, but you're trying to apply that to cosmology, which is empirical. So it's just kind of a weird roundabout way of justifying the belief. I mean, I think I understand the psychological motivation of doing that, but it doesn't really bear any fruit because you're not coming at this from the standpoint of looking at cosmology and trying to work with the data that's present there in the field, you know?
Okay. So I mean, the relationship that I'm trying to answer Aron's question with is just to say that I view quantum mechanics as just the relationship by which minds produce physical instantiations. That's what I'm saying. It's the observer effect, right?
I'm not following that sentence.
So I'm saying that, right, you have a mind, and then you have, within that mind, you have abstractions, and then you have like point-like objects. Right? So an object that exists according to a certain description, like a certain rule, like a rule of processing, computation, that kind of thing. The abstract things are the computations and the laws of mathematics, whatever.
You're saying a wave.
Did I hear you say a moment ago that this immaterial mind produces physical things?
Yeah, that's the way I view things.
And how
There's
does
the interface
mind? How does a? I mean, it sounds like I could paraphrase this, I think, accurately, if I were to say that the immaterial mind that you're talking about literally dreams shit up.
Yeah, it sounds
I mean,
like
if you're
magic.
familiar with Bernardo Kastrup, I mean, he outlines the basic kind of worldview here. So you have a mind at large, which produces thoughts, and the thoughts are basically a wave function. And then individual minds then interact with that wave function. And during that interaction, the thoughts of one mind and another, they collapse the reality to the given instance of reality that you see in front of you.
So we, Dave and I, can have a meeting of the minds and collapse reality? Or do you already have to collapse reality in some sense before you could believe what you just said?
Well, the mind at large, or God, that has to establish the most generic facts, and then what we do is we decide. Obviously, we have control over our own bodies, so then we participate in reality at the local level. That's what I'm saying.
But you're trying to take you're taking the concept of superposition and you're injecting just a little bit of mysticism in there and trying to attribute it to some kind of immaterial world. That's not really how physicists talk about it. I mean, you can have like an outlandish interpretation of it, I guess, but that's not really what physics says. You know what I mean?
Well, that's not their job. Like, they're not theologians.
Well, yeah, but
and why would they be?
You're adding an ad hoc layer on top of empirical science that there's no connection there, right?
Yeah, and some physicists are theologians. The problem is the theologians know that there's no evidence that any of this is true. These are called assertions. Assertions are when you say something's true and there's no way to show whether it's true or false. It's just, or maybe it's just that there's no way to show that it's true. Assertions could easily be shown to be false.
Okay.
Also,
Do you have
Well,
anything
so
that
if you
shows
think
that this is true? Do you have a reason to believe this?
Right. So from which standpoint? So you're asking me about the stuff I was saying before about where like wave functions, quantum mechanics, or from the first argument I tried with the infinite
Let's try the
sets and the
simple
finite?
thing first. Do you have a reason to believe this?
Well, yeah. Which part?
Okay. Any of the parts. Do you have a reason to believe any of this? Do you have a separate question? Do you have a reason to believe all of this?
Well, yeah. I mean, so I just like summarize the argument. So I just say that
Yeah, you gave an
there's an
argument.
objective
You
relation.
didn't give. You gave an argument that was based entirely on assumptions of assertions or assertion of assumptions.
Right. Well,
But you didn't give a reason to believe any of it.
right. Okay. So let me just give an argument, like a step-by-step argument. So a
Will it
mind can
include a
select.
reason to believe the argument?
Yeah, that just be like the validity of the argument.
Okay. So
Okay. So like
the
a mind.
validity of the argument. So the argument is the argument. The argument is the reason. The validity of the argument, which is nothing but unsupported assertions, and that's it. So all we have are unsupported assertions, and that's it.
What you're saying that they're unsupported, but you can ask me about any of them. I can try my best to
I did
explain them to you.
I did, and you said the argument is the argument, and the argument is the argument, and therefore we're done. That's if the argument is your reason to believe it is because you have an argument. Unsupported assertions are all your argument is, so all you have are unsupported assertions. You just haven't realized that part yet.
I think the problem we're having here is that you're trying to build some kind of argument for how the immaterial can interact with the material, and the bridge that you're using is the wave function, and you're treating it in an overly abstract, mystical way, in a way that physicists don't really talk about it. I think you're kind of taking advantage of the concepts in quantum mechanics to try to pretend that there's something immaterial going on there. We're still just asking the simple question: how can the immaterial interact with the material? Right? All of the laws and the rules that we understand from science, from physics, regarding how the physical world operates, it's all physicality. It's all based on physical things. So we're still looking for some kind of an answer in terms of how the immaterial world can affect the material world, and just saying wave function kind of doesn't cut it. You know what I mean?
Well, if you say wave function and quantum mechanics in the same sentence, that's got to confuse enough people that it sounds like a valid argument.
Yeah.
Right. So do you acknowledge that mathematics is abstract?
Is it?
Sure.
Do quantities of elements, do quantities of things still exist regardless whether we're there to count them or not? Would the quantities change if no one was there to count them?
Yeah, sure.
And it wouldn't matter what numeric system you do. Base 8 wouldn't matter. I mean, ultimately, the quantities remain the same regardless which system you use, and it does, regardless whether someone counts them at all. So that if you double that, or if somehow a duplication occurred, then we would have twice those things, right? So a number plus a number is still the same thing as twice that number, whether someone's there to count that, whether someone's there to do the math or not, right?
Right.
So it's not abstract.
Well,
I could go in the middle there. I mean,
abstract.
Mathematical relationships are inherent in the universe, but I mean, then we also conceive of irrational numbers and imaginary numbers and things like that. But I think we're just doing computation. You know what I mean? We're just like that. We can think abstractly doesn't demonstrate the actual existence of an immaterial world. I don't think.
Yeah.
Okay. So I mean, I agree with what Dave just said. So what I was trying to ask is that if you were to acknowledge that mathematics is abstract, I wasn't saying that it's not objective. I just believe in an objective abstract world as well as an object concrete world.
Okay, so you don't think that mathematics is objective. So if I say, as some mathematicians have actually done, to me, they posted this thing, they wrote a paper to prove mathematically that 2 plus 2 doesn't necessarily always equal 4. Now, it was a great joke that they played on people by, you would have to know something about mathematics in order to realize where the flaw is. But there was somebody that posted a paper like this. And of course, it was disproved based entirely on the fact that mathematics is objective. It's not abstract. So that even when a mathematician produces a paper to make a bogus argument, we can still prove that the argument is bogus objectively, without relying. What the difference between objective and subjective is, it's not reliant on any one person's personal experiences or impressions or whatever. This can be confirmed by a group of other people.
I think the problem is that I think you're conflating abstract and immaterial, right? Like that we can think something abstractly doesn't point to the actual existence of immaterial. You know what I mean?
Okay, so there's two things. The first thing that I disagree with is the idea that something that's abstract isn't objective. What I'm saying is I believe in both objective concrete things and an abstract domain. So that reality has an objective abstract domain. To me, that's the reason why there are objectively correct mathematical answers. Obviously, on our side of the correspondence, we can be incorrect. We can be irrational about mathematics, but the very possibility of rationality means that there is a correct way of mathematically expressing things. But as to what you said, you're saying that the abstract is not immaterial. I'd say that they are coextensive. Right? They are the same, because something to be material, it has to have an existence that is specific to some location. It's an object that you can measure. It's an object that exists in a certain place and time. Whereas abstract is like the opposite of that. That abstractions are things that encompass large groups, categories of objects, and that's what immaterial means. Something that's material is not restricted to one place.
For example, what I'm saying is in mathematics, we utilize the concept of infinities, and there's all different kinds of infinities and scales of infinities and things. But I don't believe that anything infinite exists.
Okay, but why not? Wouldn't that be inconsistent with the rest of mathematics?
Why? Why would it follow that just because we can conceive of something abstractly, that it therefore must exist, whether we deem it material or immaterial?
I can conceive of Godzilla. Does that mean that Godzilla exists?
Well, addressing the infinity thing. So when we look at the universe, so the universe is a finite space. It contains finite values. Well, in mathematics, when you have a finite space and finite values, it has to be connected to an infinite set through a function. So it's called a bijection function. And that's just for the sake of consistency. It's because the members of the set have to come from an infinite set, and they are bounded into like a bounded space by the relations of the set, and that's through the function.
I hate to use a word that flat earthers use all the time incorrectly, but this term reification, I feel like that's what's going on here, taking something abstract and trying to imply some kind of actual concrete existence. I understand what you're saying, and I mean, well, to an extent. I'm not like a math expert or anything, but you can make these kinds of connections, and I just don't see them necessarily having to then manifest.
So you're saying you're saying that the mind can cause things to come into being, and then you used your mind to cause this God to come into being through the course of your argument, which is all you have is your argument. Your argument is your argument. The argument is its own validation. It's unsupported by any evidence. There's no reason to believe the argument except that it convinces you that you can convince something to come into existence. So I can conceive of Godzilla. Does that mean that Godzilla exists?
Well, no, but my argument doesn't do that.
Why can't Godzilla exist? I really want to come up with a mathematical abstraction by which Godzilla can exist.
I don't think it can't exist. I just don't think it does. We've never observed it, so we have no reason to think it does.
Oh, there's no reason to think that Godzilla exists. Drop the Zilla off that sentence. Let's try this again.
You've never observed any evidence for the immaterial world, is what we're getting at here.
But that takes me back to something I said earlier. So that there are facts about the world that are not physical facts. They're not material facts, like facts about mathematical consistency, like facts about geometry, like, facts about logical relationships that never appear, that never that you might never observe in physics.
But that's so why you're equivocating this abstraction with the existence of an actual entity, right? I think that's where we're not seeing eye to eye here. Like, we understand the concept of abstraction, and we're understanding the concept of immateriality, and you're equivocating them, and we're not. I think might be the main thing we're not agreeing on here.
Right. Okay. So the reason why, obviously, I'm concluding that God exists from the argument is that there's a relationship between information and mind. What I'm saying is we observe the kind of information that allows us to conclude that in the universe. Right. So the type of information that we observe, like laws of physics, physical facts, they're obviously independent of human beings, but they have to come from somewhere. They have specific values. They have a specific structure. And through the mathematical model, we can infer that they're designed by a mind that is infinite in nature. That's what I'm saying.
Why would we make the baseless, unsupported assumption that because in order for anything to exist, it must have properties? So you're saying that the properties of anything that exists, we can infer that they must have come from a mind, except that I cannot infer anything that is not evidently true and that is not even possible. Can you show me that it is even possible for a mind to cause this to come into existence? So not just that that it's true. Show me that it's possible.
Right. So I mean, you could say that there's a relationship, but what I'm saying is that
I could say
the
lots
world
of things. Sorry.
Look, also, more importantly, I think you use this. You said that everything has to come from something, but then you invented a thing whose origin you refuse to explain. Right? I think that's the main problem behind all of this. Is you're very uncomfortable with a causeless universe, and so you're making these assertions about an entity that must have created it. But then you're stopping the the responsibility there. Right, it's going to be turtles all the way down. Right, we can play this same game and say, where did this immaterial entity come from? What is the origin of that? And of course, you will say that you don't need to explain that, right? But why? Right, you would need to explain that just as much as a cosmologist would need to explain the origin of the universe, right?
Well, no, I'd say that it's eternal and it's also omnipresent. There isn't anything outside of it. It's all. It's by definition, it's all encompassing.
How can anything
has to everything else?
Why does that make sense? Right? How can something exist eternally into the past or outside of time or whatever justification you want to make? Why does that make more sense than a universe being causeless?
Well, I don't apply the question of causation to the beginning point of the universe, because obviously causation takes place in space and time. But again, what you mean
there
is
is no beginning of the universe, so we could start there. The universe didn't have a beginning.
Well, it's up for debate.
Well,
I don't know.
Well, I mean, NASA says that it's 13.8 billion years old, and there's reasons to think that as well.
Cosmic inflation has been dated to that, but not the universe itself. So material energy, in every model of cosmogony that has a singularity, that singularity pre-exists the inflation. And there are models in which there's a previous form of the universe, or that either the singularity is eternal itself, or there's a previous form of the universe that kind of collapses into itself, where the arrow of entropy changes direction. Things like that. There's a reason I say that I don't do cosmogony. I like to do things that are more easily demonstrated for smaller minds like my own.
But I think more cosmologists would posit that there is a t equals 0. I mean, I myself believe that. I say the word belief because we don't have information prior to a very particular small increment of time after the singularity. But
and to your point, if there is a t equals 0, that singularity is already there. So there was never a point when there was just nothing. The material energy that was contained within the singularity is already there. And coincidentally, according to Sean Carroll, universal wave function also is already there and not abstract.
Well, I agree that they're there, but I don't disagree with they're abstract. Okay. So what was it you wanted me to say? So you're actually asking me where God comes from, right?
Well, I don't even really want to have that conversation so much as I just want to point out that you're trying to exclude your entity, your immaterial entity, from requiring any kind of explanation. You're just asserting it was there, it was always there. It's why can't we just do that with the universe, right? Why can't we just cut out one extra step and just say that?
And I'm taking a very different tack. I'm taking the point that we both have the same reality to explain, and without trying to avoid absolutes and trying to weigh multiple hypotheses at once. Let's gather our evidence to see which of our two hypotheses is better supported by the most or best or most reliable evidence. So we have a universe which may or may not have had a beginning. If it had a beginning, the material energy was always already there, so that it never started from nothing. That's the argument I probably hate from creationists the most. You believe everything came from nothing. No, I fucking don't. And I wish I didn't have to hear that from you every goddamn day. So we have a universe that did not start from nothing, if it started at all. And then we have a cosmic inflation that could have been for any number of reasons. Now let's hypothesize what the issue is. And I don't know what relevance the God idea has, because when people who are arguing for God, they're usually arguing for some doctrine of man-made mythology that we know is not true, arguing against sciences like evolution that we know and can prove are true.
Go with just some abstract, right? Let's just stick with a very general, nondescript God. I think that's fine.
Yeah. So let's say we have a singularity. Maybe it's eternal. Maybe it's preceded by a former version of the universe. Regardless, whatever. Nearly 4 billion years ago, we have a singularity that begins an inflation, a cosmic inflation at rapid speeds, for whatever reason. And we're going to come up with explanations for that. And you're going to posit an immaterial mind, whatever the fuck that means. So explain that, and explain how your brainless mind does anything.
Okay. So, I mean, just quickly addressing what Dave was saying. So, it's not the fact that I'm just asserting that God isn't subject to the same relationship, like the causation relationship. It's just that the universe is finite in nature. And if it's finite, then it still has a relationship to an infinite thing. Well, yeah.
Do we know for sure that the universe is finite? Because I'm not even sure that they're absolutely certain about that.
Well, let's go with it, because I believe that. So let's hear it.
Professor Dave believes the universe is finite.
I believe that.
I'm on the fence. I have no idea.
I believe that there's no infinity of any kind, that there is no actualized infinity, whether that's space, time, the potentiality
or chronology. There's a temporal infinity either way?
No, neither way, yeah.
Neither way. You think time will end? You think there's going to be an end of time?
Yeah, at least in this universe. And so maybe there are other ones.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, I mean, my basis of defending it would just be to say that if the universe were infinite in volume, then the energy density would be infinitely low. We know that's not the case. Right? So there's a finite temperature in the universe that kind of proves on its own. And to be infinitely large, it would have to be expanding for an infinite period of time, which we also know to be the case. So I mean,
sure.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that with the reason why God is infinite, the universe isn't infinite, just because of this relationship between a finite space and an infinite space, right? There's a function that produces the space. So we know that space is
You believe
expanding.
God is
And
infinite?
it's expanding. Well, God isn't physically bounded. So yeah.
Is he bounded in his intellectual capacity?
I would say no.
Is he bounded in his understanding of how we would misunderstand every scripture ever written by man?
Well,
we
I'd
don't
say
think.
no.
But I also find it funny that we're referring to him as a he. I've never found that to make an ounce of sense.
It really doesn't. I get you, but yeah, God is
Yes.
always depicted as a he, except in minority religions.
Yeah, but again, we can steelman this and stay away from any religious depictions of a deity. Let's just stick with the ultimate abstraction. He can delineate the properties of this deity however he wishes. I still don't believe in it, but it's not as patently absurd as the deities of the major religions.
True. I'm just saying that if there was an infinite deity, I mean, he's absolutely infinite, one would have to wonder why this deity would allow all these awfully wrong religions, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, all of these. But maybe it's an apathetic God. Maybe we're talking about a deistic God.
Yeah.
There are a number of options.
Only
God
the
just doesn't give a
Abrahamic
damn whether we literally doesn't give a damn whether we have a correct understanding or not.
Right. We can conceive of such an entity. But the problem I'm having here
Well, that means it exists.
Yeah. But why are we then not talking about the origin or the causation of this infinite entity, right? It's a much harder pill to swallow that an infinite entity simply exists without cause than the finite universe. And again, that we can conceive of infinity as a concept does not actualize. It does not then therefore mean that anything infinite does exist.
Okay. Well, I mean, to address that, I kind of have to refer to the contingency argument, because you have to start talking about this relationship of contingency. So, something that's contingent is something which exists under certain conditions and does not exist under other conditions. But there's a famous syllogism.
Just a moment. I'll let you continue. Are you going to go into the argument for a necessary being?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Continue.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, just to lay it out, you say if everything is contingent, then the series of entities has no first term that provides it with existence. And if the series of entities has no first term that provides it with existence, then nothing in the series of entities exists. But entities in the series do exist, right? So we do observe existence. So therefore, some entity in the series is non-contingent. And so only a contingent entity can be temporal. So basically, therefore, a non-contingent entity is eternal. Yeah. So basically, there's a first entity of the series which is non-contingent and eternal, and that just means that everything depends on that, because everything else is contingent on it.
Go ahead.
You got this one, Dave.
I don't. I was not following.
The argument for the necessary being, every version of the argument is always a syllogism that, much like the Kalam cosmological argument, the premises are not necessarily true, and the conclusion is a non sequitur, which also depends on certain things being misdefined. Like where if you define truth incorrectly and you define God incorrectly, then you can define God as truth. And that's where the whole thing about the necessary being seems to come from. That was what was it? That was Aquinas that came up with the argument for the necessary being. And it's amazing to me that so many centuries later, people still use it. But it really boils down to, you can't explain blank, therefore magic.
Well, no, it's not saying that. It's just saying that.
Well, God is magic. Same thing.
We're saying that you can't have an infinite regress of contingent entities. There has to be some member of the series that is the first term. That's what it's saying.
Why isn't it the universe?
So when I got into a debate on this topic with some people, and I said, okay, well, if material energy, if nothing, if everything didn't come from nothing, if there was never a time when there was nothing, in this universe where there's something, there must always have been something. The something of eternity is apparently material energy, or dead, unconscious material. And the people that I was debating with decided that the necessary being was my conclusion of dead, unconscious material was somehow their living, immaterial God. I said, so you will take anything at all and turn it into its exact opposite just so that you can complain this thing that you're desperate to believe in.
Okay. So, I mean, what Dave asked me was, why isn't it the universe? Well, because the universe isn't eternal, and it is contingent on certain facts. So that it can't be the non-contingent entity, because it displays contingency of its own.
Why do we need a non-contingent? I'm just not like, yeah. Why are we pretending that it has to be contingent on something?
Yeah.
No, so that there is something non-contingent. I mean, the syllogism. What the syllogism proves is that there has to be a first term in the ontological series.
So
that's how the series works. So, what do you say?
And what is your first term? That something had to have existed. There was something that necessarily existed. The necessary existence in this case, and the one that I suggest, is material itself. You can speed up material to make energy. You can slow down energy to make material, but it's still the same thing. So dead, unconscious material is not the living, immaterial, immortal consciousness. Right? You get that, right?
Right.
Okay.
But
So what does it matter?
Yeah. So what does what matter?
The necessary being is not immaterial, it's material. It's not conscious, it's unconscious. It's not living, it's dead. So therefore it is not God.
Well, no, I'd say the non-contingent entity is eternal and omnipotent.
Why would it have to be omnipotent?
Well, because if something is non-contingent, the relationship it has to everything else is contingent on it. But if everything else is contingent on it, that means that
if we're talking about a universe in which there is no supernatural, no magic, no gods, which is that's the one hypothesis. You want to have a hypothesis where reality isn't real, it's all imaginary, it's all imagined by a mind. And I have the hypothesis where reality is real and there is no immaterial mind to imagine it. In which case, the necessary being is the dead, unconscious material, and you have that it is the immortal, immaterial consciousness. And then we're going to look for support for that, right? So we have a universe in which everything is apparently material. There is no immaterial, there is no magic, there is no God. And you're going to give me a reason to believe the direct opposite. Only you don't have a reason. You just have an argument that is based on nothing but unsupported assertions that I'm supposed to believe because reasons?
The assertion that the universe is contingent on anything is baseless, and the assertion that your deity would be non-contingent is also baseless, I feel.
No, the universe is contingent. It's contingent on the laws, like laws of expansion, laws of thermodynamics. It's contingent on the speed of light.
Not an entity have created it.
In order for something to exist, as we've already said, it must have properties. If it doesn't have properties, it doesn't exist. Coincidentally, and this is kind of important, God doesn't have properties. But we're going to ignore that. What?
Or your God has properties, but then we're asking where those properties...
You can't say that God is conscious and also say that we are all a dream of Brahma. Not in the same argument.
I wasn't saying that we're in a dream of Brahma.
I don't realize that you were saying it, but yeah, you were. Go ahead.
No, I wasn't saying like a dream. I was just saying that physics is like God's thoughts, right? So the laws of physics are God's thoughts. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. We are imaginary. We are supposed to believe that we are a dream of Brahma.
Well,
I first
imaginary
heard
is
this argument
defined
at 12
on
years
what?
old. I first heard this argument at 12 years old. It was instantly my least favorite theistic argument, and it remains so still today.
I just don't really understand like the hyper intellectualization of apologetics. Just it's very clear that you just you want for a deity to exist, and that's fine. And you're kind of playing with semantics and twisting words around to pretend that there is a logical basis for it. There isn't, and we also cannot disprove your deity. So it's just kind of, I think it's just going to be this way indefinitely. I just don't really see this ever being resolved. As long as you don't, preach some hyper specific deity from one of the world religions and try to assert any position over public policy or anything like that, I'm absolutely fine with you holding your belief. I don't like apologists trying to intellectualize faith and turn it into a logical argument that doesn't exist. I'll never see it. I'll never see the logic behind this way of thinking.
Okay, well,
and I have to have reason to believe something. So we have pretty profound evidence that there is a material universe, that material exists, that atoms are real. And that if in fact atoms were not real, if everything was imaginary, then we have very complex sciences to show how vision works, how our hearing works, how the sense of smell works, all of these. And all of these are determined by the existence of atoms. So that if atoms themselves do not exist and everything's entirely imaginary, then your God, who imagined all of this, also imagined these excuses that he knew would fool us. Thus, the God you imagine is a liar. So I have problems with all of that. So we have reason to believe that there is a material world. Give me a reason to believe that there is a non-material, i.e. magical, alternative reality.
But was that going to give you a reason why there isn't a magical reality?
Supernatural, immaterial.
Material. Yeah. What is that even?
I just wanted to make sure I understand the question.
Supernatural equals magical. If you use the word supernatural in a sentence, you could replace it with either the words magical or imaginary and not change the accuracy of the sentence.
Okay, but sorry, I'm just not sure what the question is. You want me to give you a reason for something?
Right. I've given you the reason to believe in a material world. Can you give me a reason to believe in the immaterial mind that literally imagined everything into existence, or that it doesn't really exist because we are all, in fact, imagination? Give us a reason to believe your position.
Sure. I mean, there's this idea of digital physics. So it's a model of physics which views physics as being the output of information processing. So, I mean, you can have, like hypothetically, the world could exist inside like a mechanical space, or it could exist as information processing in a mind. Well, I mean, in physics, there's this holographic principle, right? And that's basically showing that physical space itself is an emergent 3D representation of information processing. That's kind of what that's saying. But then there's also this area of study called, maybe you've heard of it, quantum cognition and quantum decision theory. And that's shown that information processing inside a mind, it actually exhibits the quantum principles which are known to underlie the emergence of physical space. So from those 2 points, we can infer that the information processing from which physical space is emergent is basically scientifically indistinguishable from the same information processing that occurs in a mind. So you would basically just say that either our world is
in quantum mechanics. It's just saying thought obeys quantum mechanical principles, therefore it's immaterial. That doesn't follow.
When he says we can infer he really means let's just imagine.
This is what I was getting at earlier.
I'm saying that
stuff. You know what I mean?
It's to do with models. It's to do with scientific models, right? So there's this old, if you're familiar with like the way that they used to do psychology, the predominant approach was, it's called classical psychology, or basically using classical statistics. And it came, they came up with these puzzles, like called the question order effect. Right? So there was kind of basically classical statistical modeling couldn't predict the order in which people would answer questions when there's like a sequence of questions, when the sequence of questions was altered. Like people seem to be assessing the outcomes of a question like all at once. Sort of like you think of the alternatives all at once, and then there's like a kind of you give the answer afterwards. So I might have made a mistake there, but what I'm
these are all very interesting things about the process of thought, but they don't point to anything immaterial existing.
Well, what I wanted to point out is that once quantum cognition came along, what they did was they applied the basis of quantum mechanics, which is complementarity or non-commutativity. So it's like this idea that certain processes can happen in parallel. So like entanglement and so on. They applied those principles to these same question order effects, and what they found is that it eliminates the paradox. Right? They end up with like more accurate modeling when they do that, and so the inference. Like what Aron was asking about, the inference is that that what is happening inside a mind is the same kind of information processing that takes place in quantum mechanics. So what I'm saying is that the two are scientifically indistinguishable.
I don't. This is what I was talking about earlier. Is you're just pointing at quantum mechanics and pretending that it infers immateriality. It doesn't.
No, I'm saying that, right. So in this digital physics model, the physical space is emergent from a deeper reality. It's a model of physics that comes from studying the quantum properties of black holes. Right? That's where the holographic principle comes from.
Okay, I'm getting the impression that when you say a deeper reality, you mean not reality at all.
Right. We're asking you to substantiate that aspect.
Well, I mean, the support for that is the way that physicists have built on this theory by a guy called Juan Maldacena. So he wrote this theory in 1997. He's an Argentinian physicist, and it's called the conformal field theory, and it's linked to like this special kind of space called an anti-de Sitter space. The anti-de Sitter space is where the physical states actually appear, like the physical space actually appears in the ADS. That's where you see all this information. Well, the conformal field theory is where the information processing takes place. And so these ideas of holography are now combining in the quantum cognition results and stuff. Those kind of fit into in that previous theory. This is how physicists are building this model of digital physics. So what the connection is just that physics can be hypothesized to emerge from information processing.
Aron,
I have a question then.
Aron,
the whole universe can be a simulation too. It's
Aron,
substantially anything material.
Aron, can you please check Discord?
Can I? Okay. All right. So we've been having fun with this, but I checked Discord. All right, and I was having fun with this. I haven't been checking the other calls and Q, and I probably should have.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think
so your recent point calls to attention. Why is it then that, because you said this was in 1990 something or other, that somebody in Argentina wrote a thing and gave you an excuse so that you can make believe what you were already determined to make believe. But when you bring up the argument from a physicist said this, why is it that now, or as at least as recently as 2005, only 7.5% of physicists believe in God?
You're asking me why? Yeah,
it's not 70%. That's 7%.
Well, I mean, I can't read their minds. I mean, this is all to do with interpretation.
Okay, and you can't read their minds. Which, if you could, that would be an argument for theism as well. So I've been told that we need to move on, and so I'm going to. Yeah, I appreciate your
This was
time.
all-
I was having a bit of fun with this, but that is kind of at the exclusion of everybody else. And we do have other theists in the waiting, so I'm going to go ahead and let you go. Thank you for bringing that in. All right,
Thank you.
and we will get on to the next caller. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay, so we do have another theist. I said Dave, also in the UK.
Hello.
Hello. How do you do, sir?
Howdy.
I'm very well. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. Do you have an argument?
Well, to be completely honest, not overly on why you should believe in God, because I looked at the title of the show today, Should We All Be Believers? And to be completely honest, my personal belief is that if you genuinely don't see a reason to believe in God, you probably shouldn't be a believer. And I think I'm a theist. I believe in Christianity. I was born and I was raised a Christian, and I don't really see a reason to apostatize out of it, as it were. And I think there's actually a lot of European Christians or relative, like European Christianity these days is more like we were born into it. It seems to work for us. We don't take it that seriously. We're not going out evangelizing, telling people they're going to hell. And I was first wondering, do you think there's any harm in that kind of belief? Do you think we should all become atheists, or do you have a view on that?
Your question is, should we all become atheists? I don't like
to
view.
Should fair weather Christians, shall we call them fair weather Christians, should we become atheists?
It's obviously less harmful than evangelicals, but also recognize that there are tiers there, right? There's atheism and theism, but then within theism, there's tiers of specificity. Christianity is a very specific type of theism, right? So not being a Christian wouldn't necessarily make you an atheist, right?
Yeah, I understand your point there. Yeah,
I like the idea of not holding to a belief in things that we don't have a reason to believe or that we can't show to be true. I like the idea of being open to maybe this is true and maybe it isn't, and I remain unconvinced. However, I have eventually crossed that threshold. I was for many years. I was an agnostic atheist. I wasn't convinced that there was a God, but I wasn't convinced that there wasn't one either. So I'm an atheist, but I was a weak atheist or an implicit atheist or whatever. And after arguing with theists every day for decades, I now have enough information that I conclude that there is no God.
Fair. So I'm wondering then, would you personally say that to be an atheist, you should probably hold the affirmative belief that there's definitely no God?
No, I would. I prefer the larger category where if you don't have all, how can people have the experience of debating with these people and doing researching all of the history and philosophy and the science and the theology and reading every religion's different scriptures. But people don't have that all. They don't need all of that information to decide whether or not they believe something. They just need to be convinced by an argument to decide whether they believe something, right? But I think the best point to start with is where you don't have a belief. Allow yourself to be convinced either way if the reasoning is good enough.
But he asked about harm, right? So I'd like to answer the what you specifically asked. There's somebody whose entire religious worldview is simply, I believe that there is a deity of some kind. End of story.
Yeah.
That's a very unoffensive and non-harmful belief. The more specific you get within a particular religion and adopting scripture and doctrines, the more harmful it can potentially be. Now, that doesn't mean that some little old lady creationist sitting in her house believing a thing that she believes, or whoever, that's incredibly harmful. but it's a slippery slope. And you say in Europe you guys are not as evangelical as in America, so I think that's a fair distinction. So I would say that it is less harmful, obviously. But I mean, if you're engaging in modes of thought where you are entertaining factually incorrect information regarding the history of life or the solar system or the universe or whatever it is, I think that there's a harm there. There's a measurable quantitative harm, I believe, depending on what your beliefs are. I don't know what they are.
Yeah, I'm not a creationist. No, I believe I accept that evolution happened. For instance, that Genesis is metaphorical. That Noah's flood is
all
not
of
a world.
Scripture is allegory. All of Scripture is metaphorical.
Well, I think that I'm going to have to break with, shall we say, other Christians and say that I think that most people need to accept that what's written in the Old Testament especially has to be considered allegorical. It has to be considered, it's like, what did ancient people want to write about God? How did they conceptualize God? How did they see the universe? That it was not meant as a literal account. And it's one thing that does confuse me, why Christianity, which is obviously supposed to be mostly based on the New Testament, the New Covenant overriding the Old, how does Christianity also seem to produce at the same time a lot more like biblical literalism, like Old Testament literalism, more than, say, Judaism, which is more based in the first 5 books of the Old Testament? How did Christianity get from the New Testament to actually Genesis was literal? It's confusing when you think about it.
It is very confusing because they're completely different gods. They're absolutely incompatible.
Yep.
But you're saying that about the Old Testament. What about, do you believe in like a resurrection and a Christ figure and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I believe it's possibly true, and I understand that there's not going to be objective direct evidence for it. And I think that Christians should admit that. They should admit that we take this on faith, and that our belief structure is supposed to tell us that faith is something that we should have and there's something that's good, and that these attempts more recently to argue that, Christianity has to be true, and specifically the Christian God has to be true. Well, firstly, you shoot yourself in both feet very quickly, and secondly, you basically abrogate nearly 2,000 years of Christian teaching. What happened to faith is supposed to be good by this point.
I would agree with the first half of what you said. I mean, but having a neutral plane where, as I mentioned before, you're open to be convinced if the reasoning is good enough. I would not agree that faith is good. I'm of the position that faith is the most dishonest and auto-deceptive position it is possible to have, and that if you want to pursue truth, the first thing you have to do is reject faith.
Yeah. I mean, I understand your point. I've listened to some of your talks before. Yeah. I mean, particularly from a religious perspective, I do find it very confusing almost that we get into like God has to be mathematically or logically proven, God has to be presupposed, and all of these beliefs that I've said before. I can listen to good atheists and really have a think and question some or all of my beliefs, but I have a much harder time whenever I hear bad arguments for Christianity, and those mostly including like the presup nonsense, or God has to exist and it couldn't possibly be natural, and I know this because Bible and not any other scripture. I find bad arguments for Christianity considerably more persuasive to the atheist position than good arguments for atheism. It almost makes you think, am I really in the same boat as these guys? And what should I do about that fact that I do seem to be in the same boat as these guys?
I empathize with you there completely.
Yeah. I mean, I probably don't have that much to say that will interest the audience, to be honest. But I do want to say, while Professor Dave is here, that I'm very glad that he debated Whitsitt and blew him out of the water. And I also think it was good for Dave to come on to a channel like the one that he did, because one of the reasons why I think it's valuable for people to come on to platforms of people that they disagree with, even quite vehemently, is that the platform is always going to be there. Somebody's going to be talking there. If Professor Dave wasn't the one talking there and blowing Whitsitt out of the water, it would just be another flat earther or another conspiracy theorist or another bad guy. And it might just help people reach the audience that we really need them to reach. We need them to reach these people that are in these bubbles. And sometimes the only way to reach the people in these bubbles is to go inside, even if you're just going to nope out of there and say you're all crazy. If you don't go inside, it's not like nobody's going to be there. Somebody bad is going to be there instead. So I'm glad he did it.
Thank you.
I completely appreciate that perspective. And thank you very much for that. I do have another call that I want to get to. As you mentioned, you probably didn't have that much more to say that it was of interest. Everything you've said so far, I almost everything, certainly in the last minute or so, I did appreciate and agree with. So can we let go of this call and move on to the next one?
Thanks for calling.
Yeah. Thanks for taking the call.
Thank you for calling in. Okay, so now I'm going to jump to we have another theist in the line, and this is Lad, identified as Lad. So
how's it going?
Yeah, very good. So, what I'm reading here is atheism causes people to be so open-minded that their brains fall out. Open-minded means that we're willing to be convinced by reason, that we're not, by definition, that we're not closed-minded, so that we refuse to change our minds if we're wrong. Is that a fair way to assess that?
I would agree to, yeah.
Okay.
I would agree.
So what would your argument be then?
Well, I would just say that you just need to look around at how atheists behave, and they tend to behave rather irrationally.
Do we?
How
do we really?
How do? Okay, so I'm on the board of directors of American Atheists 501c3. That has afforded me my position as an atheist activist has afforded me the opportunity to commune with and converse with some of the absolute greatest minds on the planet today, including some that would warn me about my own biases and how to check them. So right away, my personal experience would violently contradict the assertion you just made. So let's hear how you defend that.
Well, you would agree that the majority of scientists throughout human history have been theists.
I would agree that in a time of ignorance and cultural Christianity, that most Europeans had Christianity forced upon them since early childhood, to the point of killing them if they were seen as heretics, as apostates, or what is it? Heresy, apostasy, and blasphemy were all considered damnable crimes with a death sentence, so that for centuries, most of these scientists knew better than to ever question the existence of God publicly, or else they would be killed or at least stripped of all of their possessions and imprisoned, as Galileo was, and so forth. So, yeah, I would concede that by legal necessity, with the church dominating all of Europe for a good time, that there was a time when scientists knew better than to publicly question God. What was it? What was your point about that?
Also, hang on. Also, all you're saying is that it took us the process of learning enough about science until we realized that theism is not necessary. Right? Once we figured out enough stuff about the universe, we went, "Oh, okay, that's how all this works. Got it."
Yeah.
You're just saying science is awesome, basically.
Was there any science that ever supported God?
I'll take that as a no.
Yeah, I'll take that as a dropped call. I didn't push any buttons, but that seemed to do it.
Yeah, it's like, look, obviously everything that you said is true, but also there were genuinely theistic scientists. But that's the thing, is like, if you look at what happened in the fields of biology and astronomy and all these areas leading up to like the 19th and early 20th centuries, like it took that long for us to be like, all right, we have a pretty solid understanding of most things. Right? It just took a while to get there. But once you get there, you realize that, what the God of the gaps was shrunk down into these tiny little nooks and crannies. And now he's in one spot, T = 0 of the universe. It's the only place the God of the gaps is anymore. He's not even in abiogenesis anymore. Right. So it's like,
Yeah.
this guy, it's like, come on, can everybody like, God of the gaps is such a bad argument that theists themselves go way out of their way to pretend that they're not referencing a God of the gaps, even when they are, because they know what a garbage argument it is.
And to what Dave just said about the origin of life is not even the argument that creation is relied on for centuries anymore. You've got an opportunity right now. I welcome the argument for over abiogenesis. You can't explain how life originated, so therefore God, right? I welcome that argument. I've got the goods to bring, and I'm sitting here with Professor Dave, who debated James fucking Tour on this same topic. If that's your argument, today's the day to call in.
Yeah.
So we're both good for that one. All right, so I'm going to bring in an
anti-origin of life bullshit. Yeah.
I'm going to bring in a atheist caller. So Bonnie, can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, I was taking you off speaker.
So I'm reading here that you're an ex-Muslim or Mormon.
I'm an ex-Mormon. I'm an ex-Mormon.
Spectacular.
Pretty different.
Yeah.
Which is actually why I was calling in today, because I knew you were going to be there. So as a fellow ex-Mormon, I was hoping you could help me. There was recently a death in the family, and it's the first one since leaving, not the first one since leaving Mormonism, but since I truly realized I'm atheist and I don't believe in any of that. So I'm just trying to figure out how to deal with that.
Oh, man. Death in the family from the Mormon perspective. I have to tell you that while I was raised to be Mormon, my family just kind of expected that once I was baptized Mormon, that I would automatically believe everything that they believed, because my family didn't do a lot of exploring other beliefs. They just kind of accepted that everybody in the community was intrinsically Mormon. And so it just didn't come up a lot. And when we lived in the Four Corners area between Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, there were places where if you weren't Mormon, I mean, they're like little towns and such, that if you weren't Mormon, you weren't employed.
Actually, that's where I live, so trust me, I know.
Yeah. But then when we moved to SoCal, suddenly all of that was different. Suddenly, I remember as a child when my parents got divorced and we moved to Los Angeles area, suddenly the Mormons didn't own and control everything anymore. And so when people ask me what my religion is, already I would realize that there's a problem. If you want to know what my religion is, then we're going to have issues, because it shouldn't matter. But then when I mention, well, my family is Mormon, I would say it with there's a pregnant pause. There's going to be a comma there. But they never let me get past the comma. It would start telling me all the ridiculous things that the Mormons believe. And they would do this like right outside my house. I would have usually Baptists or something. And I'm just standing right outside of my house trying to. I would say, "You want to come in and tell my mother that she believes all these crazy things? Because I'm with you that Mormons believe crazy things, just not those crazy things. Come in and tell my mother that she believes that. And why, if you thought I was Mormon, why would you ask me if I knew that Mormons believe X? If I was Mormon, I would already know whether we believe X, right? So it was important for my development in my in comparative religion. And honestly, if I had been raised Baptist, I might never have realized this. But being raised Mormon in Los Angeles, where not everybody was Mormon, and then the majority of people were in fact not. If I was raised in Alabama as a Baptist, I might never have questioned my faith at all. But being raised in Los Angeles as a child in the 1970s, where I got to see this interdenominational hatred against, one form of Christian versus another form of Christian, all telling me how they're not the true Christian. Every Christian hates every other Christian. That was formative for me. Because Mormons do consider themselves to be Christian by and large, or they did in the 1970s. Yeah.
Well,
there's been a lot of schism.
I know my mom does.
Yeah. My mother always thought that she was Christian. She was so very proud of being Christian, but she has of late been forced to recognize differences between her and some of the evangelicals. That's not always consistent, though, because what the hell the guy's name that was hosting the Blaze? He's a Mormon. And he was addressing an evangelical crowd, and he's quoting the prophecies from Third Nephi, and the evangelical Christians were eating it up. Evangelicals were getting read Third Nephi, and they're all about the prophecies. I'm like, does anybody in this room have a clue what's going on?
I want to see that.
I thought it was brilliant. You people believe that the Book of Mormon is completely made up nonsense, but there's a prophecy in it? Oh, I'm in.
What was your question about processing?
The Book of Mormon is made up, but I'm sorry, what?
Your initial question, what you were talking about processing death outside of the context of faith. Is that what you were initially wanting to talk about? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, that is a tough. Let me real quick short story. I had the opportunity to go speak to Children's Hospital, to the chaplains, the collective chaplains at Children's Hospital, where my own my own granddaughter died of leukemia just a year or so before. They wanted to talk to a handful of atheists, and there were supposed to be other people that were there with me, but everybody else had to cancel, so that I ended up being the only one talking to 10 or 11 chaplains. And they found it very challenging. They said that more and more of the people that we deal with are atheist. And we've noticed that the things that would normally sate or soothe Christian parents not only don't work on atheist parents, they actually irritate atheist parents. I'm like, I get that. If you come and tell me that, my granddaughter's in a better place now, I'm thinking dirt is not a better place. And so they asked me all the little platitudes that they would tell to believers that would make them feel so much more comfort would just irritate the fuck out of non-believers. And they say, well, what do we say? What do we say to atheist parents when their children die of cancer? And I said, well, if you want to tell me that God needs another angel, then you're just picking a fight at the wrongest damn time. We don't want to hear lies, or we don't want to hear stupid bullshit. What we want is your humanity, not your theology. We want to know that you have compassion for the fact that we have just lost a child. This is a big damn deal. And don't tell us stupid bullshit that we don't believe in.
Yep.
Let us know that you care as people. If you can't think of anything to say, can you give me a hug? And just shut the fuck up otherwise?
Yeah, there's nothing else to say. I mean, especially there's a difference between like a tragic, untimely death of a child and dying of old age. You know, when you're 90 years old. I mean, I don't know. Anytime I encounter death, I just try to think about my own finitude and try to be present and take it. You know, we're all going there. We're all headed there. It's every single one of us will get there, and we'll be there in that last moment, and we'll have to process that. And but right now, it's not that moment, and I'm gonna enjoy this one and the next one and all the ones I have left. You know.
I hope that everybody gets to do what I did. You reach the age that I've gotten to, at least, and you have as few regrets as I do. You fucking won the game.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. So, and that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm as kind of heartless as this sounds, because this was not an elderly person, but still someone in very, very bad health. I feel like it's better because they're not suffering anymore. Because I don't.
Sure. You know, I saw something
they had
recently.
a very good life at that point.
I saw something recently where there was a young person who said something very similar, that she hadn't lived to be 30 years old. She's dying in her early 20s. But the way that she described her life and her experiences, she's okay with it. She's learned so much, and she feels that there was value in the life that she lived. And of course, there would have been more if she had more. But she's facing death. And she says, I really appreciate the experiences that I've had. And if it has to end here, so be it. I've had people who loved me, and I've got to experience some wonderful things. Appreciate what you got. I was moved almost to tears that some 24-year-old woman who was not expected to reach adulthood managed to beat all this adversity to get to as far as she did. I was moved. I'm also moved by people who have lived their lives as theists, and it's when they become elderly that they no longer believe. And they're at the point when they're supposed to be getting desperate about their judgment in the afterlife, and this is the point where they realize, you know what? I just don't buy any of this anymore.
Yeah. I wish my parents would do that, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, okay.
All right, have we?
Thank you very much.
Are we done here? Thank you very much.
Yes.
I appreciated your call very much. Thank you for sharing that.
Right. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Good night.
All right, so before we move on to the next call, I've got some announcements to read. So tomorrow, that's Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central, we have Chewed Gum with Eve Was Framed. Then on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, this is, again, Central Time, we have The Hang Up with Seth Andrews. If you're not familiar with Seth Andrews, do listen to that. He is... It's not just that he has a voice made of butter. It's also that he has a humanitarian connection. He reaches people on a human level better than I or most activists that I know can. So it's always wonderful to be able to talk to him. And then on Wednesday at 2 o'clock, again Central, we have the Hang Up. Oh, excuse me. On Thursday, it's the Transatlantic Call-In Show with Josie Luxander. Then we skip to the Sunday Show with Matt Dillahunty, followed by the Sunday Show After Dark with yours truly. And also remember that Super Chats of over $5 or more will be read online. So do encourage your charity there. Dave, you got anything?
Yes. No announcements from me. Watch my channel. Professor Dave Explains. Check it out.
Okay, yeah, good stuff. I love the doc. I haven't been able to see all of them, but I like a lot of the documentaries that you do, and the ones that are most amusing to me are the flat Earth arguments that you address, because there's always so much humor in that, and it shows to me that a lot of these believers, whether they're flat Earthers, geocentrists, or young Earth creationists, whatever they are, they're just making excuses to pretend to believe something that really, in reality, they don't understand at all. And because they understand so few things, the only justification, the only balance they can achieve is when they get to pretend as if they're questioning the status quo, as if questioning means that they've already analyzed and understood something they clearly didn't.
Yeah, they're not questioning anything. They've arrived at an ideology that has given them an identity that they enjoy, and they will cling to that. I mean, it's very much like being religious. I mean, it's the same thing. But flat Earth is the absolute bottom of the barrel, most indefensible thing that anybody can believe. Much more so than believing in like the resurrection of Christ or anything like that. Like that's very absurd. But we can all see with our eyes and make very simple observations to prove that the Earth is a sphere. So I try not to do too much flat Earth stuff. I mean, I took a break from it for a couple years, and then I came back and I did one on Eric Dubé's dumb book because they still cite him as some kind of messiah. And then I did one debate with this Witsit guy because, again, I did a debate a couple years ago with one guy. They're like, "Oh, you'll never debate him. He's the best." And then I trounced him. And then they're like, "Oh, he's controlled opposition. You're afraid to debate this guy." It's like, debate this guy. And they're like, "Oh, well, you're not." They're already like talking about some other guy that I'm supposed to debate. It's like, you guys, stop it. Stop it.
Yeah, you already debated James Tour. That was like the name that always came up for me as this is the unbeatable guy. This is the one guy who they would claim knows their shit. And then other people, other researchers in the same field that he's professing to have knowledge of, can't take him seriously.
Yeah, no, I mean he's the laughing stock of the scientific community, but yeah, I mean to his credit, I mean he was the only he was the Discovery Institute darling because he is a working scientist, right? He's an actual working scientist. He's not like one of these other guys in the DE where they weaseled their way through a doctorate and then never did any science after that and just became evangelicals, right? That he is a working scientist, right? But it's pretty amusing what's been happening with James Tour though, because what happened was he started doing all these other things. Like he went over to Harvard and humiliated himself there, and then he made some accusations of plagiarism on Lee Cronin. So I came back, like some of his colleagues came out and with some stories of his actual legitimate like plagiarism and fraudulence and malfeasance and all these other things. So I started broadcasting those, and I think it finally got to the point where Rice administration had to go like, you need to stop. You're humiliating this institution, because he's been really quiet for months now. Like he's not doing it anymore. Like he's really shut up. So I consider that my top kill. I mean, it's like he's quiet as a mouse over there. He's not doing any more apologetics.
If you consider that your top kill, as well you should, sir.
Yeah.
I was there for that debate. I was embarrassed for him at the way that he was arguing.
Yeah, I mean, his behavior alone, I think, caused a lot of people to kind of like, wow, I did not really expect him to act like that.
All right, I've got a couple more calls we got to take, so I'm going to go ahead and jump onto this. No more theists anymore, but if you're theistic, please call in. We'd love to talk to you in the time that we have left, if we can. In the meantime, we're going to talk to somebody from South Africa. This is Jay. Jay,
hi.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yes, I can hear you.
Where in South Africa do you live?
Near Cape Town.
Oh, so you were all the way on the other side from where I was. All right, go ahead.
Well, okay, as you can tell from my topic, I have kind of gone down a rabbit hole about the Terrence Howard situation recently. um, and, it got me, in conjunction with that, I've also been reading a few books. Uh, Specifically, one is Innumeracy. I think you guys would be familiar with that. Um, and the other one is about Gödel's incompleteness theorem and how it's used and abused in contexts other than the one it is intended for to push certain narratives. Um, and I've just the Terrence Howard situation has really just got me questioning
For the
whether
sake
our
of the
approach to
audience,
science. Oh, sorry.
what is the Terrence Howard situation?
Yes. All right. So the most recent situation, a few years ago, there was the situation of him saying 1 × 1 = 2, I believe, and using some very, let's call it interesting, uh, mathematics to do that. By interesting, I mean false. But the recent
It's
one
not that
is
hard to do. You
when.
just take the plus sign and turn it slightly sideways.
Yes, exactly. A 45-degree
I can summarize
rotation,
this
easy.
quickly if you like.
Sorry?
Here, I'll give the quick summary just for posterity here. Terrence Howard is an actor who is completely insane, and he is pretending to have revolutionized every area of human inquiry: physics, chemistry, mathematics, logic, when in actuality, he's just an idiot who can't do second-grade math. He went and spewed this crap at Oxford Union, and the students all laughed at him, and then he licked his wounds for a little bit, and then he went on Joe Rogan's podcast and spewed all this crap for 3 hours. And
Joe
everybody
Rogan
is
again.
But the thing that, and I think what Jay might be referencing here is, and this is something that I've experienced as well, because I made a debunk about that Joe Rogan appearance, and it went unexpectedly viral. And I thought we were all just laughing at a lunatic, and I have been absolutely shocked at the thousands upon thousands of people who have come to harass me and spew vitriol and accusations of racism and pretend I'm not on his level. I don't understand what he's talking about. He's actually a genius. He has 97 patents, all this crap. It's unbelievable how many people are falling for the gibberish he spews. Is that where you're at as well, Jay?
Yes. Yes. Exactly. I've been, reading YouTube comments. Obviously, I watched multiple creators' hours-long deep dives into the situation, including yours, actually. And I've been going through Reddit threads, and it's genuinely shocking to me how
Yes.
large of the population, or well, it could just be bias, as in the people who agree with him will be vocal about that. That could be the case, but it's still shocking that
Doesn't
people
matter. It's
believe
sheer numbers.
blatantly obvious falsehood. Sorry?
Yeah, it doesn't even matter the proportionality. Just the sheer numbers of it alone are shocking.
Yeah, exactly. And it really got me thinking. Because I guess when I listened to what he was saying, obviously he did a lot of hand waving, so to say. He said, "Oh, this." He didn't give reasoning for it. He just said the frequencies of the periodic elements or some shit. The colors
Yeah.
of them are the same. And he didn't
Same key
give
of
a
E.
reason for it. Sorry?
He said same key of E. These elements are the same. They're the same element because they're the same key of E, same frequency.
Yeah.
He's just insane.
And,
he's demonstrating he doesn't understand chemistry, music, like all of these things all at the same time. It's absolutely unbelievable bananas.
Is he aware
is,
that there are
and-
different periodic tables that use different colors?
No, it's much worse.
Okay.
So that it got me thinking about proper science communication, and I realized that also involves a lot of hand waving. in a sense, you can't really get in depth into the complexities of linear algebra or advanced calculus when explaining physics or chemistry to the average person, because it would be an immediate turnoff to most people, because most people have almost an instinctive avoidance of math.
Mm-hmm.
And, so proper science communication with the general public also involves a lot of hand waving by kind of dismissing the mathematical bases and derivations of what we know. So I guess how do we differentiate, or I don't know if that's the correct word that I'm looking for, but what's the difference, I guess, or how could we alter our approach to not be so hand wavy, like Terrence Howard does? Because someone looking at taking it all at face value, they have no reason to believe proper science communication and not believe Terrence Howard, because to a certain extent, both of them are hand waving. And obviously, I, as somebody who knows a bit about science and a bit about math, I can tell, this is clearly bullshit. But a lot of people can't. And how do we? Should we maybe change our approach, or would that even be possible? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, you don't need much math to debunk the dumb stuff that Terry says, apart from the basic arithmetic. I think that what you're saying holds the truest in frontier areas of physics, where without the math, it just doesn't mean anything, right? But when he's talking about, I used essentially no math in my Terry debunk, because it's just explaining what words mean, right? When he says hydrogen is just the first element that we can perceive, right? There's actually elements before that, the lower frequency. No, hydrogen is the first element because it has one proton, 2 protons, 3 protons. That's that is just helping people understand what an element is. What does frequency mean? Frequency of what? Frequency is cycles per unit time. Just because you can describe light with a frequency and sound with a frequency, it doesn't mean that light is sound, right? They're totally disparate phenomena. So it's just helping people understand what words mean, right? I mean, it really is it for most of the stuff that SciCommers need to get through. I think that only breaks down, like, you can't talk about, say, quantum mechanics without math, stuff like that. But basic 10th grade chemistry, you don't need math for that,
Yeah, fair. And I guess a follow-up question would be, how do we criticize this without feeding into the persecution complex that these people often have? In that Joe Rogan podcast, he said that the government was hacking into his phone and laptop and shit. So I guess, how do we criticize that without causing the people who believe? Because it's very hard to change somebody like Terrence Howard's mind once they're so deep into it. But maybe we could change the minds of other people. But how do we?
I'm not going after Terry. I'm going after the people who fall for his bullshit. Right? He's insane. He's unreachable. And the other people, they're grifters. Right? They're never going to change. So that's not who you're going after. You're going after the people who fall for it.
Yeah. But how do we criticize? We are essentially criticizing something that they believe, in a sense, because they probably encountered that before a debunking video or whatever, and so they already maybe believe that, and then they see the debunking video. How do we? I guess, how do we address that?
I understand what you're asking. The problem is that there's no definitive answer, because no matter what your approach is, and so I have a very particular approach. I'm very abrasive, and I tell it like it is, and he's insane, and I call him insane, and the things he says are stupid, and I talk about how stupid they are. And that's my approach, and that's what I feel, that's my truth, right? you can get somebody else like Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a lot more diplomatic, right? And so there's benefits to that, but it also, there's a drawback there, because when you act that diplomatic, you're lending credence to the things that he's saying, or you're giving it a false air of legitimacy. So no matter which way you go, you're either making something seem more reasonable than it is, instead of calling it out for the complete and utter bullshit that it actually is, or you do what I do and you are abrasive and you tell it exactly like it is, and you run the risk of rubbing people the wrong way with your tone. But there's no correct way to do it. And that's why I always advocate. I go to schools and I give talks encouraging young science-minded people to go into science communication, because I always say, right, we need a lot of people doing this with every different tone, on every different platform, in every language, to every demographic, etc. Because the way I do it, I'm going to get a few of them, and Neil's going to get a few of them, and this other person over here is going to get a few of them, and we need everybody to all do it together to get as many people as possible and help them understand what's going on. You know what I mean? So
to Dave's point about how abrupt he is, I'm much the same way. I've been accused of being a bulldog. That you're not going to convince people by telling them that they're stupid, and I get that. However, the recently deceased philosopher Daniel Dennett famously said that there is no polite way to tell somebody that they've dedicated their entire lives to a delusion. So if there's no polite way to do that, let me see how rude works. Let's see how blunt works.
Yeah.
That's actually a good way of putting it, I suppose. You can't really, I get what you mean. And I guess my last point would be, how do we avoid coming off as elitist in a certain sense? Because I've seen a lot of people criticizing Terence on the basis that he doesn't have a physics degree, he doesn't have a mathematics degree, and I do think that holds ground. Obviously, somebody who has a degree in the relevant field is more likely to actually find a breakthrough in the field than somebody who does not. But I feel like there's
you don't have to go that route though. You just show how he's wrong, right? I have a 48-minute video just showing he's wrong, here's why, he's wrong, here's why, he's wrong, here's why, he's wrong, here's why. That's all you need to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to clarify, I don't
a high school janitor or a ticket taker at Grand Central Station, a clerk in a law office could just as easily happen across the secrets of the universe, and I would be the entire scientific community would be willing to listen to that person if their evidence and was backed by, or their arguments are based on or backed by evidence that they can show, and so that other people can test it and say, hey, I think this patent clerk, he's got a point. We should pay attention to this. We should test this.
Well, he was also I mean, he was pursuing his doctorate in physics, but the point is that anybody can do it. But the problem is that these
I didn't tell who I was talking about.
I know, but I mean, but the point is that these types, they're so objectively wrong to anybody who has any experience in the field, because they're not even using the vernacular properly. They don't even know what these words mean that they're saying. So all you have to do is show that you just illustrate for the viewer what they say and how incompatible it is with real science, right? And I don't call the viewers stupid. I call Terry stupid and insane, right? Because these are true things, right? But then for the viewer, I say, if you are someone who has put stock in this, please consider these facts, right? And examine your own cognitive bias and, your obsession with an anti-establishment narrative and these kinds of things, and try to help them deconstruct their own way of thinking. I don't say, you viewer, you're dumb, but the person I'm debunking, I call them dumb because they are. So I tell it like it is, and they deserve it, not necessarily the viewer.
I often point out when people are being stupid, and stupid isn't just Stupid isn't just that your argument is invalid, but that when it is ignoring counter evidence that prove you wrong, and you're just going to continue plodding forward anyway. That I define as stupid.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess stupid is, in that sense, is a different word for stubborn and ignorant at the same time. And oh, I know I said last question, but just a small follow-up. Is there anything about the field of physics specifically that attracts so many quote-unquote crackpot theories? Like, why is it so prevalent? Because I'm in a lot of physics and mathematics subreddits, for example, and a lot of the times I'll just see I found the theory of everything, and why does physics and to a lesser extent mathematics attract so many crackpot theories? I suppose.
Because
if I may volunteer, a
Yeah.
very simplistic answer. I'm an older guy. When most of the movies that I watched as a child were in black and white, and I like, because I'm a kid, I'm a boy. I like monster movies, and nobody understood radiation, and because nobody understood it, that became the explanation. Radiation is the explanation for everything we want to make up.
Yeah.
Everything from Godzilla to the Incredible Hulk. It was radiation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just
same
to
thing
speak
going
generally.
on here. Yeah, just use the word quantum physics, and same thing.
Yeah.
Nobody understands that either. Therefore,
it's that physics is fundamental to the nature of the universe, right? It doesn't rely. It's like people don't know what, like lay people don't know anything about molecules. They don't know how to speak about molecules, but concepts like space and time are familiar to everybody. So it's more accessible in a way, even though physics itself is actually more abstract if you really learn about it. But it interfaces with concepts that everybody has some familiarity with. So it's an easy access point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, thank you guys very much. Have a nice day, night, evening. I'm not sure what time it is for you. But see you. Bye.
All right, thank you much. All right, I'm going to jump right to the next caller. If you're okay with that, Dave?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so we have Mary. We have another atheist on the phone. And what is your question, Mary?
Hi, Professor Dave and Aron. First, I want to ask, how is your dog doing, Aron?
Thank you very much. My dog is right behind me right now. It took a few hours, but he started getting better, and he was all good this morning. For those who don't know, my dog went to sleep a couple nights ago in my room, just like the way he normally does. Everything's fine. He woke up the next morning staggering, stumbling. It's like, if you remember Captain Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean, how he can't stand still without waving, weavering, and stumbling just to stand in one place. That's what my dog was doing. And so I had to physically lift him out of the car to put him in a gurney to the vet. And they didn't know what was wrong with him either, but they gave him fluids. They gave him an anti-inflammatory. They said he'll probably be good tomorrow. And he was. So we have to assume that he must have eaten something, because there's a lot of things dogs eat that are not poisonous to people, but are poisonous to dogs. So thank you for asking about that.
Okay. My question for both of you is a hypothetical on the prediction about the future of human evolution. Do you foresee like humans developing longer fingers and a loss of the pinky toe, and maybe no longer having an appendix? And is that an unanswerable thing, or is it being looked into? I'm just really curious about that.
The thing is that human evolution is we are no longer subjected to natural selection in the way that all living organisms were until our modern technological civilization. Right? We're not in the food chain. We're not, the individuals of lower fitness are not necessarily at higher risk of perishing and becoming unable to pass on their genes, right? So I don't really think that evolution works for humanity any longer in quite the way that it does for the rest of the biological world or all living organisms prior to, couple thousand years ago. I think that any kind of evolution that's going to happen from this point forward, and there's people who already kind of talk about us being on the precipice of becoming, no longer Homo sapiens, but Homo Deus, or so, one of these other kind of things where we're merging with technology, moving towards sort of a cyborg type situation. So there are people who talk about that, and that further evolution on our branch will be technologically mediated moving forward, rather than abiding by any kind of Darwinian principles. But what do you think, Aron?
I don't know how I got kicked off the feed there for a moment. So I didn't hear like the entirety of the question. I think I would have to assume that this leads to the notion of transhumanism, which, as I understood it, transhumanism means that we take control of our own evolution. We no longer ascribe it just to natural selection, which, no matter how true natural selection is involved in our evolution, that doesn't mean that it is humane, nor moral, nor that we should entrust natural selection to sort us all out. We can't. That would be inhumane to do to other people. We know how to control this. There's things that we can do. Like with the movie Gattaca was a nice illustration of this. It tried to paint a dystopian future, but the fact is we can go through the genome very soon. We should be able to go through the genome of any developing child and identify, there's going to be an issue here, and we can correct that genetically before the child is even born, and that issue will not exist.
Issues that stem from point mutations, we should be able to use CRISPR technology to eradicate any kind of disease that stems from a point mutation. Should no longer be a problem within decades, I believe.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, well, Professor Dave, your first response almost sounded like we were going to merge with technology in our bodies or evolution. Did I misunderstand you, or can you clarify that for me?
I mean, it's already begun, right? The moment the first person got a pacemaker in their body, that process already started, right? And it's becoming more and more, people have, different things implemented in their bodies, but now we're talking about, Elon Musk's Neuralink and things like that. And it feels very sci-fi, and I don't know what's going to happen with that. I don't know if that's going to catch on, and, we'll all have that by the time we die, or what's going to happen. But it seems pretty clear that that's at least in part a direction that things are moving in. So I'm not too much of a futurist. I don't understand tech that much, but it seems to be going that way.
I remember being a little boy, of like 10 years old, around about 1970, and just reading articles as a little boy, like a 10-year-old boy in 1970, and reading things about possibilities for genetic alteration, genetic science, way back then, and thinking how fascinating it would be to be able to manipulate the genes of preborn organisms to fashion them the way we want them to be, and that parents could be able to make, as it was pointed out in the movie Gattaca, where it said, these are still your children. They're exactly your children. It's just that you would have to conceive 10,000 times to find a genetic product that would be this perfect. We can do that with every one of your conceptions. We can identify all of the things that could potentially be problems. We can correct them all in the genome, as he was saying with CRISPR. We can do all that now. Or we also understand what creates other things in other animals, and we know how to integrate that. So we've already started growing like human ears on mice and that sort of thing. If you need a human ear, we've already grown one on a rat somewhere, and we can just cut that one off of the rat and put it on a human, because humans and rats have hundreds of codons at a time in perfect sync. So you have very little rate of rejection. This could probably work. So there's, I think, wonderful possibilities involved in this. Can it be misused? Of course, everything can be misused. Everything. But there's also a responsible and moral way to do the same thing.
Yes, that brings up a lot of ethical issues, it would seem like. But so it sounds like you're saying that there's no, it's all going to be scientifically manipulated and change the path that Homo sapiens evolved from.
Yes.
Other primates and got the features, and then I think Aron, you said something about your wife said if evolution continues and the babies are born with bigger brains, then women are going to have to evolve for wider hips and that kind of thing. Does that make sense?
One of the concessions that our
Cardi
species
B.
has had to make, is because the brains that humans have are so much bigger than that of the other apes that we had to be born with underdeveloped brains so that our heads are not so big that they can't be birthed. So one of the concessions was that the females of our species had to have wider hips, but there's only so wide you can be. That the other concession is that we don't have the brain fully developed, which means we give birth to essentially larvae, right? The offspring of other apes are able to do things right away that we cannot. They can at least cling solidly to their mother's fur and be carried around, but in humans, no, we are way dependent, and we have to do most of our brain development after we're born. So we are utterly dependent and completely helpless for the first 2 years for the most part. So there's a lot of things that we have to concede for. But if you were to take, let's say, Elon Musk was talking about creating a colony on Mars, and I would love for him to go do that. I would love for him to just go leave the planet and go take his colony somewhere else.
Take Trump with him.
If you have an isolated community like that, because humanity hasn't been isolated for many thousands of years. We've invented travel by ship and by jet aircraft and everything. So we're effectively one interbreeding global population. So that does not evolve very quickly. We are intermingling too broadly all over the place for there to be any expression of new variants that could possibly withstand the dominant gene pool, which has more of an effect of restricting the expression of new variants. But if you take a colony and put them on Mars, well, now they're not interbreeding with the terrestrial population anymore. The Martian population are entirely on their own. And it will not take many generations at all before you would be able to meet a Martian and be able to know that they are Martian just by their physical appearance.
Founder effect.
So that's one of the aspects of evolution. But we don't have to have a completely isolated population in that respect. If we use what Dave was saying about the CRISPR technology and everything, in a few decades, we can tailor make how we want people to be.
Yeah, the problem is that
almost scary.
biological evolution just takes so long, right? And what we're able to do technologically is on a time scale that's a million times faster. So it just doesn't really make sense to look at evolutionary principles as they have operated on life for the past several billion years and presume that those are going to be the primary drivers of change in the human population moving forward, because it's just not going to be, you know.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. You've answered my question. I thought we would just lose our pinky toe because we don't really need it.
And then there's another aspect of that too, because we're only talking about our own species. Imagine what we could do with other species. I was always frustrated at the way that people breed dogs. You know, they breed for certain behaviors. So you can breed behaviors into a dog. And if you know that behaviors are genetically assigned, what kind of argument does that make for free will? Right? We know that our behaviors are genetically designed as well. But what would happen if we were to breed dogs for actual intelligence and not just for specific behaviors? And that's just if we're doing controlled breeding. What if we also implied CRISPR technology on that as well? And so Rocket Raccoon, one of my favorite fictional characters, is a lot more possible than probably every other character in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
But to answer your question about the pinky toe, right? Here's the thing that it's there's no, what is the feedback mechanism present that would cause the pinky toe to go away? Because there's no differential reproductive success based on the presence or lack of the pinky toe, right? That's we've kind of thrown everything on its head by subverting natural selection, because we're not seeing differential reproductive success based on fitness, right? We all have equal opportunities for reproduction and survival because of the civilization that we've built around ourselves. So we're subverting the way that biological evolution has occurred up until this point, and it's just now a completely different game. So the rules don't really apply to humans as they have until this point, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. So, no mark of the beast on the forehead.
Oh, well, you can still wear your MAGA hat.
Oh no! Oh hell no!
You mentioned the mark of the beast on the forehead. I just automatically assumed MAGA hat.
Oh yeah, I do too. All right, thank you guys. You have a good evening, and that was a very surprising answer. I was kind of thinking biology and natural selection, but that seems like it's gone with the wind.
To an extent, I think I could stand to be corrected by an evolutionary biologist, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a good one.
Too. Good night.
By the way, I should take off pretty soon. How much longer are you guys going to go?
Well, we've been on it for 2 hours, and I don't have any more callers.
Oh, okay.
So I would remind everybody that we do read the super chats of $5 or more. We do read those online. So if you did that, I think now would probably be the time to read those. Unless you want to try to squeeze a call in there.
Oh, no. Yeah, let's just read these and I should take off. I got to tend to the kiddos. But I'll take this one first since it's about me. $9.99 from Megan Marie. Professor Dave, loved watching you destroy. Wits it, doesn't, gets it. Great job. Can't watch the show tonight, but can't wait to watch tomorrow. Have a great show. Thank you. That's the flat earther I humiliated a week or two ago.
$10 from William Matz. Professor Dave, I love your stuff, but honestly, YouTube has tried to shove you so far up my ass that I have not watched your stuff for a while. I don't need your vids interrupting my binging. Love to you.
The algorithm has been kind to me for the past 6 weeks or so. I will say, yeah, it's a very welcome development. £5 from Mystic Mind Analysis. Whatever you believe, remember, you matter. Unless you move a light presumably at light speed and have zero mass, then you have energy. Then you energy.
Then you are energy. Then you energy. Yeah.
Yeah. True enough.
$10 from Zacuse. Yes, Aron, time can be said to come to an end in our universe if heat death in fact occurs. How much time can you say has passed if nothing can truly change anymore? Every moment is indistinguishable. I used to feel that about living in a small town.
$5 from the Raven 200. Be sure to like the stream, otherwise Aron might drop a diss track on you. Not quite Kendrick dissing Drake, levels of hard, but still really hard.
$5 from William Matz. Aron always grabbing his snake on camera. Usually you pay extra for that. Laughing out loud.
$5 from Dade Murphy. I recommend God's Problem by Bart Ehrman. Great book about why we suffer.
$5 Australian from PhD Tony. Where religion motivates anti-Semitic and antisocial activity, it has great potential for harm. It is also often used to economically subjugate people. Indeed.
I like how you dropped Semitic in there instead of scientific.
Scientific rather than Semitic.
Did I write anti-Semitic? Oh, you're
you
right.
Said
I did that.
Anti-Semitic, yes.
Yep. Sorry.
$9.99 from Steven. Professor Dave, this is off topic, but can you explain how being trans is a neurochemical construct? Anything empirical to argue against trans deniers? I'm a huge fan. Thank you so much. Yeah, I did a trans video, and then that guy, Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, flipped out, so I had to do a response to him. And I just brought up, it's a neuroanatomical construct, right? There's masculinization and feminization that occurs in the brain, much like the rest of the body. And no, that doesn't, I'm not trying to oversimplify it and say there is a male brain and female brain and a trans woman has a female brain or anything like that. It's obviously much more complicated than that, but there are neuroanatomical structures that correlate with gender identity. And I flashed a few papers. I didn't talk too much about them. I'm definitely not an expert in the field, but you can just go to Google Scholar and type in gender identity, neuroanatomy, or neurobiology. And there's plenty of papers. Obviously, the experts in the field themselves don't have a firm grasp on it yet, but they're studying specific areas of the brain as they correlate with things like sexuality, gender identity, etc. So it is actually a physical thing. It's not just, I think I'm this, right? It is actually a neuroanatomical phenomenon. That's it. Yeah.
I would like to add something to that too, because I mean, I know a number of trans people that are very close to me in my family, several, in fact. And while this is not a subject that I profess to know a damn thing about, I'm very comfortable in my skin as a cisgendered, full-on heterosexual male. I have heard arguments from a number of gender neutral or non-binary people, whatever the proper description is, who have been able, I think, to show scientific, whether it's chromosomal or morphological justification for their positions. My thought is just this. I mean, do you really have to show that there's a scientific base? We have the means of, if you think that you're the wrong gender, do I have to have the chromosomal proof? Do you have to be able to identify which physical or genetic condition leads you to this conclusion to where I can then objectively tell outside observers that this person really does have this? Because I would have thought that we had a natural right to the pursuit of happiness. And I'm aware that the trans community is such a minority of the population already that within that minority, the number of people who decide later that they made the wrong choice, that this was a mistake for them and wanted to go back, was such an infinitesimally small subset of that already very small subset, that why don't we just let people have that right to the pursuit of happiness without
Sports and
forcing
locker
everybody
rooms.
to... Yeah, why do we have to force people to prove this? I feel this way. I want to do this. We have the technology to do that. You want to do that? Fine, we'll do that. You have the
And
money
also
to
for
cover that
academic
in this.
prosperity,
There.
we study these
go
things
for
and
it.
learn about it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and I'm just reminded to read $9.99 from Stephen. Professor Dave, this is
Oh,
off topic.
let's
But
go
you're
Yeah,
right.
no,
That is
that's
the
what we're
same one.
Go to the next one.
Yeah. $5 from William Matz. Last one. Beer sucks. Hairy monkey snacks.
I don't get
That's
it, but beer
because
definitely doesn't suck.
you don't drink the shit I do.
Yeah, beer is awesome. $10 from Storm Chaser Noah. Hey, a couple of my favorites. Great Flurfy debate the other day. Dave, hey, Aron, you mentioned a tornado in Iowa that skipped everyone but hit the church. Do you know what tornado that was?
Oh, that was around 1993, and I don't remember which tornado it was. Iowa has a lot of tornadoes, but I do remember the story where it was going for a farmhouse. It skipped over the house, then hit the field, tore up the field, skipped over the next house, and everybody that was in the little tiny town had all sequestered themselves in that one little town. They all sequestered themselves in that one church, which I thought was the strongest building. And ultimately, the only thing that the tornado actually directly hit was the church, and it killed everybody in the town who were all inside that church, except for like a half a dozen people. And when the news brought 6 survivors of the entire town out of the church, they thanked God for saving them at the expense of every one of their neighbors, which I thought was remarkable.
I think is that you're on your
This
turn.
is you.
Okay.
I would have thought this was yours.
Well, I read the previous one, but
you read the one about the okay. $4.99 from Jomnik06. Love you both. Had to send a super to thank Professor Dave for taking down James Tour and the other grifters at Discovery Institute. And for those who say that beer sucks, I had opportunity and took that opportunity to have a beer with Professor Dave in the subterranean bowels of Rice University, and I enjoyed that very much. You should try it.
That was a great time. That was a great night. $9.99 from M68 Ken. Hey, Aron, what was your immediate reaction to hearing about Robert Morris being a predator? I keep thinking back to that 3-part series you made debunking a sermon of his. What a monster he is.
I am not as surprised at that yet another evangelical Christian is a child molester. I've often told the joke that how do you tell the Protestant clergy from the Catholic clergy? It's by which gender of children they molest. I was more impressed at the fact that he did this while he was married and already had a child, and I'm kind of more impressed that he's the spiritual advisor or a spiritual advisor for Donald Trump. It doesn't sound so much like he's a spiritual advisor. He sounds like he's like another passenger on Epstein's plane with Trump.
Did I read the last one, I think.
Okay, $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. Wonder if there's some evolutionary sociology reason for the credulity for claims from attractive or charismatic people, but we're not animals.
Aminals.
Aminals.
Yeah. What is the evolutionary basis for falling for charismatic frauds? Yeah, I don't know.
I'm at a loss.
Yeah, I think it's just an artifact of our emotional intelligence. Any more? I should probably take off. Okay. $10 from Jeff Cochran. In my humble opinion, humans are not primarily rational creatures, but emotional creatures capable of reason. Humiliating people for their irrational beliefs is often more effective than trying to reason with them. Yeah, it can be. They do have to go to sleep at night and then reflect on how that went.
$5 from Stomp 10. What is the worst contradiction in the Bible that you feel deconstructs the entire document? I wrote a thing in my book where you have all these different quotes from Jehovah and from Jesus where they are contradicting each other and seem to be arguing with each other. No one that I am God and there is none else. I create good and evil and there is none else. And there's Jesus arguing right after that I sit at the right hand of power. And then God says, nope, besides me, there is no other. And Jesus saying, yeah, you've said that, but from here on, people will see me as sitting at the right hand of power. So Jesus and God have a little bit of a tiff together about who's God and who's the gateway to God and so forth.
$10 from Don't Spill. If human come from monkey, why they're still monkey? LOL, love your guys' stuff.
My answer simply is, if we didn't come from monkeys, then why are we still monkeys?
Mm-hmm. This one's you.
Are you sure? Okay, $5 from Jonathan. Hey, Dave. Been working my way through your geology videos. It's been very helpful. Appreciate the consistency of quality. Aron, more wing challenges? I like how everybody's giving you your academic credentials and all the people are saying about me is what I eat or drink.
No, mostly the flat earth stuff. But yeah, I'm proud of my geology tutorials. $5 from Monkey at Typewriter. At this point, our biggest selection pressure for reproduction is economics, but somehow I don't think we're going to evolve to be rich. Great show.
Good point. Thank you for that. $5 from Stephanie Helms. If you'd like to have a chat with a trans woman who has competed in sailing at the professional level for 26 plus years since transition, get in touch. Okay.
$5 from Blackwater Ted. There's an old African proverb that's pronounced like mop who sees loose. I get it.
Okay. And that appears to be it. Thank you so much. I guess you can go ahead and bail. And good show. At least we got some theists this time.
Yeah, we had some good. The first one was at least somewhat thought-provoking. Yeah.
There was at least something to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Cool. So, thanks, guys, for having me.
Good to have you on again, Dave. And if you get a chance, have a beer with Dave.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody.